Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to this lovely conversation that I think is going to be helpful for many people. These are important topics that we don't really know how to talk about. And there are no rules for how we're going to talk about them. So we're going to get into it. But first, why don't we do a quick feelings check-in? And just for context for the people who might be listening, these are women that we all know each other from doing this inner work in our women's group and or in conscious relationship training. So that's what these conversations are going to be about. And feelings check-in. So just go inside, notice how your body's feeling. And maybe to make it easier, I will call on you guys by name. Cristina, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling a bit of a mix of excitement to be here because I don't know what to expect. And I also feel fear because after this Zoom call, I have to do something that is fearful to me. And I feel it in my stomach.
Okay, thank you. Erica, how are you feeling?
I am feeling enthusiastic for the call and pleased with myself for committing to the time, and a little bit regretful because I slept in very late and half my day is gone. Wasn't my feeling.
Okay, thank you, Erica. Pari.
So right now I'm feeling in my body like some constriction in my chest area up here. And I also feel some fluttery feelings in my tummy because I feel excited about this call. And I feel a bit tired today, but I'm also feeling very excited and alive.
Wonderful, thank you. And Caterina.
Okay. I'm feeling a bit anxious in terms of not knowing what to expect. I feel that kind of anxiety a little bit in my throat. However, I also feel excited and loving in terms of wanting the connection. I think that's a nice feeling in my stomach. So it's like an interesting mix of both.
Nice. Thanks, Caterina. And Georgianna Lee.
Oh, I think I feel a little bit like what Caterina's saying, a mix of things. So there's a part of me I feel in my chest that's excited to be a part of this conversation. And then there's also a part of me that was feeling really internal today of I just want to be by myself. So I feel the mix of the two coming together in this inner waking up and wanting to reach out to you guys and see you and play. So yeah.
Thank you. I too am feeling the fluttery tummy excitement and anxious for the unknown. Yeah, I planned, a conversation, but who knows how it's going to go. Also excited to see you guys. It's nice to see you again after a few weeks off for the holidays. And I'm feeling grateful that you guys are excited to be having these conversations and sharing this stuff with other people. Okay. So we are here to talk about 3 areas which are quite interconnected. Receiving, saying yes, no, or I don't know, and making requests. So I thought we'd start with receiving. That's one of the first kind of things we tackle in women's group in the first sort of couple of months when people join us, because it's easy-ish. We're often offered things and we often deflect them. For example, we might be offered compliments, which we might bat away by, instead of just saying thank you, maybe we'd say, oh, you like my shirt? I also like your shirt. Or just saying, oh, no, welcoming people to receive those things is a challenge. So I'm curious to know for you guys what your experience has been receiving, learning to receive. How comfortable were you receiving before we started doing this kind of work?
I found it really hard to receive compliments because you could say thank you and then it wouldn't be like a full body accepting, you know, like I learned earlier that if you say thank you, they stop talking. So it's a good way to kind of shut it down. You can be like, thanks. But then sometimes doing the one where you really accept and say thank you, like I'm still learning that one. And it's also been helpful listening to podcasts as well as doing the work and hearing examples of other people like say thank you in that conversation. It's like, oh, I really like your work. And I'll say, thank you. Pause, accept, and move on. And I found that that's kind of a different feeling and a bit harder to do.
A different feeling in your body, you mean?
They like to actually say thank you and receive rather than just say the words thank you, which is part of the social dance, I guess. Or often I would get something that I'm like, oh, thanks, I don't believe you, but you know, sort of learning to truncate the rambly part and just say thank you. I was better at doing, but saying thank you in a way that's like, oh, that's a nice thing to say, receive it, internalize, pause, thank, like do it properly, as it were. Much harder than just playing. Like in my shadow work, a lot of things are like, I am learning how to say the right thing and then doing it and feeling it is like another layer. So kind of like a two-step thing. Like do the thing and then you start rehearsing it and then you think, I'm not really living this acceptance, and then having to sort of focus on doing it.
Yeah, that's really actually, it's deep. We say thank you, we don't mean it, and we don't receive the thing often. That takes work to do. That's pretty significant. Other people notice that?
I notice more of the, and I think this is part of my shadow, is more of the people pleaser. Like I always learned the reciprocity of things. So when, you know, someone gives you something, you have to give them something back. And I think for me, that was always such a big, like, deflection of like the compliment, because I would be, you know, someone would say, oh, like, whatever it is. And I would always have to be like, oh, and this for you too. And it's like, I couldn't just sit with it and just be like, okay, like they're saying this about you. You don't have to do or be or, you know, you're worthy of it just as you are. You don't have to do anything else for it.
Yeah, so what kind of stuff might have come up for you before? If you don't give something back, what might happen? What's the fear?
Oh, a lot of the guilt. I would even question, like, is it valid? Like, are they, you know, is it coming from a genuine place? Are they actually being honest? Or even, that's not me. Like, it would be just, I guess, maybe underneath of that, there was like a lot of self-hate in a sense. And so it would kind of pick on that a little bit. And I'd be like, ooh, I can't believe them because this is not true.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, my experience with receiving. So historically, I have been like I've had, well, I don't really know how to describe this, but I've always had this sort of like outer, like, I'm good, I've got this, you know, I don't need help. I don't need your help. Sort of like the independent, tough girl energy going on. And so that was really difficult for me for a long, long time, because when I dug deeper and I, you know, as years have gone on, I realized that it was just, I didn't know how to receive love in a different myriad of ways from different people in different forms. And so that's been a very difficult process for me in the past, because I'd say 70% of that time, I actually really did need the help. But I
Mm.
just didn't know how to say like yes. And that was always a source of contention for me. And then I would bottle it all up and then like feel all these feelings and not know how to deal with them all. So now it's interesting because now let's say if somebody will try to open the door for me because I'm carrying lots of heavy bags, or someone is picking up heavy bags for me, now I have trained myself to actually just say yes. And it makes me feel very uncomfortable still. But I'm just like, okay, you know what? I actually really do need this help. So it's been nice to kind of transition from that, like, no, I'm this warrior woman, independent person that doesn't need anybody's help, to now allowing myself to receive the help and it's still feeling uncomfortable. And an example that I can give is like, even now, I still feel super uncomfortable receiving gifts. For some reason, there's something about gifts where if somebody gives me something, I just try to shy away, or I try to like hide them quickly, or I don't want to open them in front of people. So yeah, I know there's still a lot of like feels around receiving, and I'm very proud of myself for being able to kind of like dip into accepting the love that's shown in that moment, even if it is a small gesture or a bigger gesture, that it's all the same. And that kind of goes in hand with like receiving compliments too. I used to have a big thing with not being able to like receive a nice comment. And I realized that when I would reject it, it would be very uncomfortable for the other person. And slowly over a few years, I realized, oh yeah, this is making it, I'm clocking that this is very uncomfortable. So then I would just say thank you as a way to, just kind of, just acknowledge the other person for saying something nice.
Mhm. Well, and think about when you want to say something nice to somebody.
Yeah.
How would you like that to be received? And think
Yeah.
how good it feels to do things for people. You know, if I'm offering to carry somebody's bags, it's because I'm delighted to do it. Of course, there was a time where I would have offered to carry bags when I was in no position to carry bags, and I wouldn't have been delighted doing it. So it was harder for me to trust that other people wanted to carry my bags, right?
I have a similar experience to Perry of that, like, I'm capable, I'm independent. I grew up with this, my dad imparted his value of being competent. Like, that was highly valued in my home. So I always wanted to be able to do things by myself. And I just had this belief that if I can do it on my own, then why should I ask for help, or why would I need your help? To the point where I can laugh at myself now. I went to take my car in to have the winter tires put on one year. And these tires, my tires are on rims. They're like heavy and this metal or steel or whatever they're made of. And the man working there said, oh, like, I'll come out and grab those out of the car for you. There's 4 of them. I said, no, it's okay. And I did it all by myself. And I was so proud that, like, I'm this woman and I'm like little and I could do this myself. And there's joy in that, but I was depriving myself of this ability to receive from people. And the word that comes to mind is and. So I can be that warrior woman and receive help. And it took me a long time to practice. And like Pari said, it all started with just saying yes when people offered, even though it felt maybe a little bit uncomfortable or out of the norm, and slowly realized, like, hey, I didn't die and I'm still just as competent. And it feels good now to be able to feel and check in and ask myself whether I would like help in this moment, and honor the inner yes, even if it's a really small, quiet yes. So it's been really freeing to play with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, for me, I identify a lot with everything that have been said, so I don't want to repeat the same things, but something that I'm still working on is receiving loving words from myself. Like, now I have become good receiving, I think I accept receiving compliments or gifts, or someone who wants to help me doing something, especially because in my work, especially, I see that when I offer to help someone, or even in my life, I 90% of the times I do it because I feel a loving impulse to do it. Like it's never because I want to receive something back. So I always try to remind myself that if someone is offering me something, they're not doing it because they want something back. And my voice, like the voice of my mind, still tells me, you know, what do they want back, or are they saying the truth? But I can recognize now the voice, the automatic voice in my mind. And I'm still, I repeat, I'm still working on receiving loving words from myself.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's also a very good point. We're working on these things for a long time. Like I've been working on things like receiving and making requests and articulating and expressing for many years, quite consciously. And that doesn't mean that it's always easy, right? Have you guys found your path around this to be kind of indirect?
Yeah, it definitely takes shape over the years. And I think as I developed my relationship to believing that I deserve ease and I deserve pleasure, it's easier to say yes and receive, right? Like if someone was offering me, like, would you like should I tell this story? There was one night where I wanted to stop off at the store and buy myself a chocolate bar. And in the end, I didn't bother. And I just thought, let's just bring myself home. And I got into the elevator of my apartment, and this man, my neighbor, who I just know from seeing him once in a while, was carrying 3 chocolate bars. He was holding 3 chocolate bars. And so I commented and said, wow, you know, like, that's great. I was going to buy myself a chocolate bar, but I didn't. And he's like, oh, come on now. And his next response was, would you like one? And I could feel my body immediately was like, no, like, I don't need to take this from this man. You know, it's his stuff. But then there was also another voice that said, that would be really nice, you know, to receive. And someone's offering me right now. And so I said, yeah, I would love that. And he gave me one. And then he said, well, actually, which one would you prefer? And I was like, oh, this one's fine. And then I thought, well, actually, I like that other one better. So I just said it out loud. I said, oh, actually, you know, I really love that one. And he's like, that's great. I would love you to have it. And I took it and said, thank you. And I could see his joy in being able to offer that to me. And then I came home, got into bed, and like I just enjoyed. I enjoyed not just the chocolate, but the whole like appreciation of myself for coming to this place over the years, of noticing all the moments where I would have said no to it before, and then just leaning in and allowing myself to say yes. And I think really thinking that I deserve pleasure and I deserve that other people offer to me has been really a big part of being able to like say yes in that circumstance and to enjoy it and to have no guilt about it. And I thought, oh, do I need to like post a note on his door and say all these thank yous after? And I thought, you know what, I said thank you already, you know, and that's all that needs to be done. And if there's something else that comes from that, it will be not out of this obligation or not out of what Caterina was saying of this this reciprocal thing of someone gave me something, so now I have to do the exact same thing back, right? So it's been fun to play.
So that reminds me of vulnerability hangovers and receiving hangovers. The things that crop up after, right? We get through the receiving, maybe we receive gracefully, and then afterwards, maybe our minds and our egos want to go crazy with things that we now think we should do or say, or worries we have about maybe what we imagine the other person might want, or if there's some kind of tally sheet and we're keeping track of what's been given. Can you guys speak at all to any of that kind of stuff that might crop up in your minds post receiving?
I think for me, lately there's been experiences where I've interacted with someone who's very giving, like has the ability to, afford certain things and like just wants to give. And that's been a big struggle for me is being like, okay, now I have to give back, but I don't have that same capacity, or like, feeling like, oh, to be on that same level, to be equal, or to be worthy, or whatever the story that is coming up for me at the moment is that I had to kind of put that down and realize like people just want to give from their hearts if it's an authentic yes. If these are, if it's coming from a really good place, there is no expectation. The joy comes out of the giving to you. And the more that you can receive, it actually makes the giving, I don't know, I guess maybe even more special. And it doesn't mean that just because you're receiving something that you're worth less, or that because you can't give it back that you're not worthy of it. Like you can just receive, and life is a flow. Maybe right now at this moment in time, you can't necessarily give that same thing back. However, you can give it back in another way. Like I've found where I've received, really nice things, and then I'll give something really small back. Like I had a friend who, I got out of a breakup and I didn't have a TV. They gave me a TV, which is ridiculous. And that's huge. And it was hard to receive. And I had that feeling of I have to give them something back. I have to give them something back. And although I did it because I wanted to from my heart, because it was overflowing. And all I gave back was what I could afford at the time. And that was like a little milk frother. And to me, I was like, you know what? It's just about the flow of things. And it's not about, your sense of lack of worth. Like you can even give back a hug. You can give back a thank you. Like those things all have worth. And like, I think keeping that in the flow is really important too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, appreciation is a gift in itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
The joy of receiving is a gift. That's great. And yeah, I think, Caterina, you're talking about expressing appreciation rather than feeling like you owe them something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, being able to communicate that. And for some people, that's also hard. For me, for a really long time, that was very difficult. And that goes into, tied into sense of self-worth and things like that. But, when you're able to feel like it's okay to receive, I feel like it's a lot easier to kind of be in those places to appreciate as well.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting because the whole receiving is still very difficult for me, even though I'm practicing saying yes and learning how to let that in and also give it back. And I suppose for me, it's just like even right now, I can feel how uncomfortable I'm feeling from the idea of just thinking, like my friend came over a couple of weeks ago and she gave me all these presents, and just thinking back to the process that I went through, like trying not to open the present in front of her, trying to hide it, trying to not engage with that level of intimacy with her, even though she's someone I've known for a decade. For me, I'm still working through sort of like how to actually really fully accept what is being presented in front of me. And so I think these things, at least for myself, just take time and consciousness that like, okay, this thing has occurred. I know it's there. I'm aware. I'm not doing anything to change it. I'm just going to try to work on it bit by bit.
That's beautiful. I really love that approach.
Thank you.
Do you have a sense of how long you've been consciously working on this in particular?
Well, this is interesting because it sort of goes back to your question.
You're muted suddenly.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, it's interesting because it goes back to your question a couple of moments ago where I was thinking, oh, okay, so at what point did I realize this, and like how does that occur for other people? And I think for me, I think I just got so sick of feeling like I'd have an experience where I felt uncomfortable, and then I'd just try to push it down. I'd just try to, like, you know, repress it. And I think the more I repressed it, the more it was just like I felt like this kind of spewing feeling. And I think I just got sick of my own crap. And then at some point there was just kind of a gradual change of like, okay, maybe I can try it a different way. And it was literally like retraining my brain, or like retraining my thought pattern to be like, okay, try this a bit more. And the trying just became more habitual. So I think that I know that's how that process happened for me in its natural totality. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's the work. Good job.
I love something that Pari said about that level of intimacy with someone, right? Like giving and receiving means we put ourselves in this place of off this island by ourselves and into human connection. And as much as we all want human connection, it can feel scary sometimes.
Yeah, and I noticed that comes up like even with people I've known for a really long time. Like the intimacy that I want to build, I'm just like, in my own experience. So yeah, I resonate with that a lot.
Well, the fear of rejection is this biological function that never goes away, right? We get more secure with people. We get more secure that they're not going to leave. But that doesn't mean that our biological fear that they're going to leave just stops, because we know it doesn't need to be there. This is a work till we're done living, you know? Anybody else have anything you want to say about receiving?
Yeah. Hearing Pari's chat and like the other comments, I was sort of sitting here thinking I have quite a distinction between receiving things and say receiving compliments or acclaim or non-tangible things. I'm actually from a bit of a gift-giving family, and so receiving stuff comes quite easily to me. I'm like, cool, there's a thing. I'd love that thing. Oh, this is really great. Cool, I really like that. And I can kind of be quite appreciative in the moment. I have done some learning over that initial like dance of like, oh, I insist, and like I'm kind of tired of that. So maybe I'll do a cursory like, oh, are you sure? Actually, I often say, are you sure? And that's the nod to like, I'm about to say yes. So you're last out. So things that are going to be convenient to me, or I want them, like the chocolate bar or something, I'd be like, you know what? That's great. Yeah, thank you. And I'm pretty quick on that. But when it's something that's like, oh, I really appreciate your work, or you're really good, or it's a compliment or something, then I get all the like the running away feelings and the certainly vulnerability hangover, like they probably changed their mind, or I said thanks and then I'm going to overthink it for the next 6 months or something. So I guess I just wanted to bring up like the capacity in one area is not necessarily the same in like for each different kind of receiving. And same with like offers of help. And it's probably going to be more helpful when we're talking about giving. But when I'm receiving, I usually think, would I do it? And then I've thought of all the time, I quite like giving to my friends, helping and whatever. So I think, oh, it would not be a big deal to me if I'd offered. But then I don't really offer unless I'm quite happy, unless it's convenient or I really want to help. So I'm like, well, you know, if I've offered to help you move over Christmas, then I really want to, because I'm pretty lazy. I'm going to just quietly sneak away or just not mention anything if I don't want to help. So I think that's another factor that I can think of when it comes to like receiving. But I'm wondering, my work is probably going to be more along the lines of trying to remove that extra filter of like, would I do this? Because everyone isn't me.
Right. Yeah. That piece about acclaim resonates with me a lot. So I want to acknowledge the hijacking ego. and how we complicate things. So like someone might give us a compliment like, oh, I really like that thing you did. And maybe we can receive it. And then later on, our vulnerability hangover is like, well, they like that thing, but I want to now complicate this and make it mean, oh, but they don't know these other things about me. And if they knew those other things, then maybe they wouldn't like me at all. And suddenly it's nothing to do with the thing. And it's all about me as a person and all these aspects that people don't know and might reject. And it's just such silly mental gymnastics that we do.
For me, the more I learn to receive, and the more the experience of giving is more beautiful, because I think that I also have trouble giving, and I'm still understanding, why. But I think it comes from my childhood. And I was told, for example, by my sister when I was a child, that I was not generous enough, that I was stingy. So those words, even though, she was very young and we were both children, those words really, they got stuck in my mind for a very long time. And so a part of me sometimes doesn't want to receive because I have trouble giving. And so the two things are very much connected. And the more I learn to receive, the more I want to give. So.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably a good transition into saying yes, no, and I don't know. What about when you're all set to receive something that you don't want?
It's tough. Like my automatic reaction is to say yes. And even though I should count until 10 or do something like
long count.
or at least 3 breads or something like that. But yeah, still the automatic reaction is to say yes, or maybe later to send a text. Or like for me, the interaction in person is much more difficult. For me, it comes much easier to say no, or to say I don't know, let me think about it, when there is not the emotional interaction in person with the other person.
So how about asking for time? If you don't have a clear yes or no in your body, are you able to say I don't know and give yourself some time? Is that what you mean?
Now it's easier, but in the past I couldn't. I couldn't. I was so afraid to disappoint or lose even the other person.
Yeah, I was recently, I mean, this is more around the idea of like receiving gifts. I was listening to the Minimalists podcast, and they were talking about how when someone gives you something, or you are given something that you don't necessarily want, like they were just saying, even though you don't want it, it might be good to practice to just say yes and receive it anyway, and then you can just re-gift it if you don't want it, because basically that person is showing you the way they want to love by giving you something that might be their love language or something. And so if you, for example, if one were to shut that down, then that could elicit feelings in that person that could be quite harmful or hurtful for them, but in a way that maybe they wouldn't, say outwardly. And then it was just nice to hear that technique of like, okay, like this is uncomfortable for me, I'll take it anyway, and then just do something with the gift, for example. But that's more on the line of gifts, receiving gifts, I suppose.
But is very important, and I think the point really is to be conscious of why you're saying what you're saying. So if you don't want the thing and you consciously don't wish to cause discomfort for the other person, you might accept the thing and know that you're going to do something else with it later on. But I think it would be really important to notice if that kind of thing is running you, if your fear of maybe causing discomfort for the other person, if that's genuine, if that's a fear that you have that's sort of operating things subconsciously for you, that's definitely something to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because like my mum, she always gives me clothes and I never like them. Like my mum's not going to listen to this. And then it's like, yeah, so definitely it's a good thing to think about.
Yeah, I remember my 87-year-old grandmother produced a bra a very old bra and a pair of elastic waistband polyester trousers for me once when I was in my 20s, and I just took them.
I think this is a really funny conversation. I hope your mom does hear this, Pari.
I was like, I knew someone was going to call me out for that.
my mom does the same, like wants to give me things. And I did have the pattern in the past of taking it, not wanting to hurt my mom's feelings, right? But internally I was like, I'm never going to wear that. It's going to get donated. And now when she asks me, I notice like I pause first and I go through internally, like, would I ever use this? Would I ever wear this? And I'm like able now to say, no, thanks. And then she'll insist, are you sure? And then that sometimes it's easy to get hooked back in those moments. I'm like, no. And I think Cristina mentioned something that has been so important for me in this process is giving myself time, like slowing things down. Like I don't need to give an immediate answer. And that time gives me an opportunity to check in with like, is this actually what I want? You know? So that's been neat. And then also to still receive in the way my mom wants to give. Like when I was going through a really hard time, she said, can I buy you some fruit? And I was like thinking, I don't think I really like fruit's not really the first response I would have expected from someone, but like she wanted to take care of me by offering to buy me fruit. And so it was a moment where I could do what Pari was saying, like see that was her love language in the moment of taking care of me in that way. And I could receive it because I was like, oh, fruit would be nice, you know? But if in that moment she decided to give me like polyester pants, like I probably would have said like, no, thanks. But this brings me to this recent experience I had with a work situation where someone offered me this contract to do this work. And I read through it. And as I read through it, like my whole body sunk. And I thought like, I do not want to do this work. Like it will not bring me joy. And I will feel overwhelmed with the amount of work that's required and the capacity I have in the coming months. And it's someone who I really love and respect, and I enjoy working with her. And I was debating, you know, do I say yes to it? Do I say no? And I decided to give myself time, and it got clearer and clearer. Like I cannot self-abandon in this moment and say yes. Like I was trying to look at like, how will I feel in 2 months if I say yes to this right now? And all the signs were pointing to like, I'm not going to feel good. And so I wrote her, you know, a really like an email that really honored like my love of her and wanting to work together. And also that I couldn't say yes to this work. It didn't light me up. And this is the kind of work that would light me up. And I offered to do that kind of work and sort of just let that go into the universe and let it be okay if she was disappointed. Let her choose what the next step of the dance was. But it felt really good to be able to say that. Whereas in the past, I think like Cristina mentioned, I felt like everything had to be answered immediately. Even though nobody was asking me for an immediate answer, I just thought like I have to give an answer now. And the only answer I know how to give is yes to people, please. So it's been a real big thing to be able to take time to check in to see what I actually want. Yeah.
I think that's really important, not projecting our ideas onto these requests, right? Because people are asking us if we want something. They're not saying, please take this thing or I'll feel horrible, but we often make it mean that, right? So yeah, taking it quite literally. Do I want this? Yes or no? You know, no need to qualify either. Qualifications actually often can be received as objections that people then want to overcome. I've got a friend, and actually I've only ever met this one person who does this. You say, hey, do you want to go do this or that? And she just says, no. And it's so unusual that everyone's just like, oh, why? You know, nobody tries to then convince her or offer, well, what about this or that? Would this make you want to do it? All of these objections, you know, when we say, no, I can't because of this or that, then people are like, oh, well, let me deal with those this or that problems so that you can enjoy the thing I'm trying to give you. But we're making it mean all these things, right? We complicate things so unnecessarily and make it really confused. How do you guys feel about just making yes, no, or I don't know statements without qualifying them?
It's funny because as you were speaking, I just had this thing pop up in my head where culturally, I find that the qualification or the just basically trying to overcome any objection is part of the dance. Like it's part of, I'm offering you something, and so I'm going to ask you once, and out of being polite, you're going to say no. Then I'm going to ask you again, and you're still going to be polite, and you're going to be like, nah, you know, giving a little bit, but you're still going to say no. And then the third time is when you're going to give in, and I'm going to give you the thing anyways. And it's like this unspoken dance culturally that people do where that's the thing. And when you say no, like I've questioned it when I've been in that situation, I've really just said no. Like, no, I don't want this. No, I don't want this bra and these pants. No, I don't want this. And it just shocks people. Like they're almost taken aback of like, whoa, like you really don't want this? And then you kind of get that sense of, you know, that whole kind of guilt around, oh, I'm going to reject someone and they're not, you know, going to be happy about that. We're going to lose the relationship, or there's going to be some fear around it. And it's funny because, you know, the more that you kind of push that, I think also the less people do it too. You know, like I found the more that I've said no and stood firm in my ground is the less that I'm going to get that kind of negotiation that happens. And it depends, right? Like even thinking about who I want to say yes and no to, I've had a really big like moment with a therapist once where she's like, you know what? You don't have to care about what anyone else thinks outside of your circle of who you want to matter to you, right? Like those are the connections you're making. Maybe in those situations, you're going to say yes, like that kind of minimalist thing. You're going to say yes because that's someone showing you how they love you and you want to build that connection. But when it's someone outside of that, doesn't matter. Like if you strongly, firmly believe no, and you aren't necessarily, you know, attached to continuing a further connection with this person, or they're an acquaintance or something like that, your no is valid. I mean, it is valid even in those other situations. I think it just is a little bit more of a dance. At least for me personally, I find that it takes the teaching. It takes that, okay, I'm going to say no this one time, and then we're going to relearn this pattern together.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that culture piece is very important too, like socio-culturally, but also there's the culture, as you say, of our friend groups, of our families. We're going to be carrying all the assumptions of our past experiences and our past relationship dynamics. And it's up to us to choose which ones we want to interact with and which ones we want to give energy to, for sure.
Yeah, and it kind of like, for me, it's reminding me of like the idea of like niceness in society and like culturally, and like not being liked either. So like if you say no, oh, okay, well, all right then, kind of like a distance of some kind. Because I remember when I was asked to join like a WhatsApp group with a group of other people that I kind of knew, but not really. And then I was like, no, I don't really want to be in it. And to feel that uncomfort and other people being sort of like, oh, she's a bit weird, you know, or like, you know, I'm not sure if they were thinking that, but I definitely felt the energy shift in the room. And then also the consequences of that, because when I saw those people, I could tell just from my experience that there was sort of, they were trying to still suss me out. And so, yeah, that's what it brings up for me, is sort of like the idea of saying no and like how you're perceived.
Yeah,
and then how you're treated. I beg your pardon?
What are those people going to make it mean? People make no mean a lot of things.
Yeah. And you may not necessarily, not you, but one may not be liked for those answers or decisions. Maybe you might be respected, but yeah, there's a consequence, right? So perhaps that's a factor to think about too.
Mm-hmm.
I think a huge part of being able to say no is like learning how to be with disappointment, the disappointment of a lost connection or disappointment of being misunderstood or disappointing someone else. And I've found that as I learn that I'm responsible for learning how to deal with my disappointment, that other people are responsible for learning how to deal with their disappointment. So it's not my job to take care of their disappointment. And it's human to feel disappointed sometimes. And if they feel disappointed, it's okay. Like they're not going to die from it. But I really had to work on my relationship with disappointment, which was not a very strong, thriving one, you know, growing up in a household where I didn't have parents to help me when I was feeling disappointed. I just went through adult life trying to set up my life so I'd never have to feel disappointed, which meant saying no was really hard. Saying no was really hard. Saying things that could potentially disappoint other people was very hard. So yeah, growing that muscle of being with disappointment really shifted that ability to say no. And seeing that when I say no to someone else or something, I'm saying yes to something else. Like I'm saying yes to protecting my energy, or I'm saying yes to, you know, like honoring my time or whatever it is, right? So that's also been helpful.
Mm-hmm. That seems like a good time to introduce the concept of making requests of people. We've talked a bit about how to deal with requests that are made of us and some of the fears that arise within us. So if we flip that around, suddenly we're having to make requests and we're afraid of what people might say or do in response.
That's the perfect segue for me because Georgianna, when you said disappointment, I was like, yes, that's one of my hugest struggles of all time is managing my disappointment. And now when I make requests of people, say for their time, I've usually invested some overly complicated structure of the order of people that I've asked for that, and I'm like, if you're at the top of that pyramid, I'm going to load all of that onto this one request. And if they say no, which is totally fine, I'm going to be like crushed because I put in all this thought and all of this time. And it's totally like my learning to be like, this was all me, like my wall. And then you meet a no, which is totally fair. And it's just like, oh, what do I even do with myself now? So learning to manage that disappointment when requesting time, particularly, or spending time with people, is a massive hurdle that I am still learning to manage.
That's a really good point. If you make 1,000 requests, then getting one no feels much less significant than making one request and getting one big no.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then you feel silly too. It's like, oh, well, that was perfectly reasonable. You've made a mountain out of a molehill and like everything's quite out of proportion. So yeah, mess with your head.
Mm-hmm.
I find making requests is tricky because I overcomplicate it. Instead of being like, Kat, what is the thing that you want? But then how's this person going to react to this? And then this and this. And then it becomes like a paragraph when really the request is, I need this. Can you provide this? And I'm so sometimes scared of the answer because it means if they say no, I'm being rejected. Like then I internalize it. Like, you're not good enough. This is why they said it. And it's like, no, like stop. People can say no. You can say no and people can say no. And you don't need to take that no to mean anything other than the no.
Totally. Yeah. It's not a personal no.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I've learned to love making requests, because for me it signals some level of safety and boundaries, and like requesting from someone how to be treated, or how like it kind of protects in a way, or like creates that safety net for two people. And I really have learned to love that over time. I was very uncomfortable making requests in the beginning because I was awkward, you know. I was like, oh, how do I how do I do this? And it would come off funny in my texts, or I'd stumble on my words when I'd ask in person or something. But now when I do it, I find the response that I get is usually, even if it's met with sort of like, oh, well, you know, curiosity of like, you know, so I've noticed some people can think that they're in trouble or something. But it's usually met with openness, even if the receiving party is saying they can't meet that request. So it's nice to kind of have that. I kind of get high off that communication piece, and it's I've really learned to love making those requests.
That's intimacy. I like it.
Although I'm not sure how that, like, it's different when it's like when I'm like actually in conflict with someone, you know, when we add conflict to it, it can be definitely different. But yeah, generally speaking, it's it feels a lot safer now than it did in the past.
That's great.
I
And
think
I think I
gateway
should.
drug stuff.
What's that?
The gateway drug to be able to make requests in conflict is to be able to make requests when there's no conflict. So it's a
Nice.
great place to practice.
Love that. And I think it's important to point out here that we're talking about requests, which are in a way different than needs, or can be different than needs. So when we're making requests of people, they can say yes or no, right? And I think sometimes we confuse that by expressing a need, attaching it to that person, and needing the answer to be yes. So we're presenting something as a request when it isn't actually, when it's sneakily us saying, I need a thing, and I need it specifically from you. And if you say no, I'll die. That's not really a request, right? But sometimes we'll phrase it as a request and imagine that that's what it is. But it isn't. A request is something that can be said yes or no, or I don't know. Have you guys had any experience or like a story arc in your life of what a request even is?
I think I recently requested, or I was expressing a need. I don't know. And now I think I confused the two a little bit, but I recently requested from my boyfriend to receive more words of affirmation, because this is my love language, one of my love languages, and I really need and I would like to receive them. But at the same time, like I was open to receiving kind of a difficulty on behalf of my boyfriend, because his love language is not words of affirmation. Like he feels a lot, but he doesn't express it. At the same time, I was very grateful that I was brave enough to express that request or that need, because at least now he knows that I need that, and you know, that would make me very happy. But at the same time, I don't want anyone to give me something that is so unnatural to them. For example, I know that my boyfriend grew up in a family where he didn't receive any compliments. He didn't receive any words of affirmation. So maybe he would like to give me more, and he's trying to do that. But at the same time, that comes with so much effort and so much difficulty that I am open to receive, you know, this difficulty, and maybe it's going to take him years, but at least I express that.
That's so beautiful. It's so wonderful that you can see all of those sides and recognize his love, even if it doesn't look the way you'd like it to. And it's so important, this piece of expressing yourself and expressing your need, whether you receive it or not. The expression of it can be just as important to feel fulfilled, especially in a relationship. I think that's great.
Yeah.
just to the point of like how invested you are in the relationship affects greatly how brave or how much effort it takes to express your need. Like I have an acquaintance that I keep up a conversation in Instagram on, and he sent me 2 memes that addressed me as the word bitch. And the first one I was like, don't really like that. Interesting. And then he did it again a couple of days later, and I was so quick because I'm not super invested like in this relationship. I was like, well, it's so easy. I was like, please don't call me bitch. I don't like it. Then he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, no problem. You could have told me earlier. And I was like, no worries. Like, and it was so easy. And it was just funny because I thought, well, one, good practice, because, you know, I'm saying the things that I know I should say in a higher consequence relationship. But it was just funny, like thinking about it now, I'm like, this is what I need to do in a higher consequence relationship or more close relationships. I mean, it's hard with COVID. I would probably see this person more if it wasn't the way the world is right now. But it's like, oh, that was so easy. Just got what I wanted. All I had to do is ask. Don't do that. Sorry. Oh, good. Can it be that easy?
Well, and expose yourself, right? It's easy to expose yourself when people don't matter, you know, for lack of a better.
Yeah.
But, and what irony that the people who we're closer to, more intimate with, that it can be scarier to share ourselves and our needs in that way. That's the good old ego at work, protecting us from connection and love.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like the notion of like courage or bravery, because especially in those intimate relationships that we have, because when we are more invested, there is a higher risk to some degree. And especially if you've like had a relationship where you've kind of formed a certain way of being and then someone tries to steer it in a different direction, it can be kind of can shake the container a little bit. So it's interesting, like the self-honor piece and the bravery and the courage that it takes to make that request to someone that we really love and care for, and that's really important to us.
Yeah. So what are some ways that you guys make requests of people you're close with?
I feel like I'm still working on this. I have learned a little bit in terms of just even like language. I like to kind of share how I feel, first of all, and then kind of explore why I feel that way. And that helps me take a little bit of responsibility of like what I'm needing. So I'm not abandoning myself. And then being able to see that and say, out of all of this, my need is blank. Are you willing to meet that need? Or are you open to meeting that need? And I find sometimes you don't have to over-explain. I think sometimes you can just ask for what you need. But I find that maybe in those more like higher stakes or more intimate relationships, I find that having this understanding actually helps people to feel a little bit closer to you, and sometimes even just be a little bit more willing to meet that need, even though maybe originally, if you just kind of said it straight out, they might not. Because if they're understanding where it's coming from, like you're essentially teaching them how to love you, right? And loving yourself by speaking your truth. So I find that that piece helps. But I do, like Erica mentioned, when people aren't as close to me, it is a lot easier just to be like, I just need this right now. That's okay. And it's quite, I guess, straightforward, I should say. Yeah.
The funny thing is that we are more afraid in these, you know, we're calling them higher stakes, more intimate relationships. And yet these are people who likely obviously care more about us than some random stranger on the street and would want to, you know, help us honor these needs. And they just might need to know that they have permission to choose a different strategy, maybe to meet that need of ours, or have some flexibility on how they want to meet that need. So yeah, I just think it's funny that we trick ourselves, our ego tricks ourselves into thinking that the people we care most about and who care most about us somehow have zero capacity to want to care about what matters to us, and that's just not true. And I think that when what Caterina is sharing of like really sharing why something matters without making it into a demand really makes a difference.
Mhm.
Yeah, and like also like asking for permission instead of putting it on someone too. It's like, hey, these are these things that I'm experiencing. I have a request, however it is your choice. Not making it feel pressured for someone else, I think really kind of just opens up that energy for people to really like relate.
Mhm.
Because I know when I've made requests under the feeling of anxiety, like it never goes well. You know, it
Mhm.
always bounces back being like, ah, yeah, no, it's not a good result most of the time. So yeah, the readiness, I suppose, of making the request also.
Mhm. Well, sometimes I think we make requests, or we feel that we need to make a request when maybe it's simpler just to express that we love or want a thing. We don't need to request it specifically. We can just be open to expressing that we desire it. And who knows what will happen. And being open to that, I think, is also important.
I think that's actually a really good point, because it goes off of what Georgianna mentioned too, that the people that love us want to love us. So when you're kind of, you know, expressing how excited you are about something or how good you feel about something, I feel like that makes it so much easier for someone to be like, okay, I'll do this. You know, I want you to be happy. Like I want, you know, this to be successful. So I'll meet you there. And it's less of a, I'm taking something away from you. Like I'm needing this and you're not giving it to me. Like the energy is very different in that kind of a approach.
Totally. Yeah, it's not an energetic exchange. It's just everybody's adding energy.
This is making me think of a few times where I've just crashed into thinking I'm expressing a need, and actually it's all jumbled up with my need for control that I need to let go of more. And so I'll be like, because I'm still learning and practicing, I'm like, I think I'm expressing a need. And I'll be like, wait, no, I'm being unreasonable. And I'll kind of realize that. And I was like, no, that was a totally unreasonable request. I'm like, I need to know when you're going to do this and this and this and this. And then I sort of will think about it because the exchange didn't go super well. It would be like, it's a reasonable thing to request of someone, you know, to be. I'm thinking of a time where I was out with a friend and she sort of, to me, abruptly wanted to go home, and it wasn't abrupt at all. And I'm like, look, I think I need to know all of this information if we're going to do this next time. And she was like, no, I don't think so, because, you know, I could change my mind at either time. I don't know that ahead of time. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point, actually. This all ties into that me managing my disappointment, where I'm like, and I'm sort of trying out the new skills, going like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna express a need. And it's like, no, that's not it. So I'm trying to learn what the need is. So I think that slowing down piece is also going to be good, or maybe even just giving it time and not being sort of upset and unbalanced in the moment and talk about it later, rather than like, I'm all jumbled up and I'm just kind of flashing out and using the wrong tools at the time.
I think two things that Erica brings up is like, reminds me are so important, is like that we'll stumble through this process and we don't have to wait until we think we know how to do it perfectly in order to make a request or say no or do whatever the thing is. And like, just do something that's different than our old patterns that weren't working for us, and see what happens, and trust that we will not die from it, from the discomfort of it. And then also transparency, like being able to say to someone, hey, like I'm trying this thing out where I just say what I think and it feels a bit weird for me. Can you bear with me right now? You know, and like, just, I think that element of vulnerability really gives other people permission to also think, oh, maybe like I'm allowed to do the same. I'm allowed to sort of mess up or just share how this is hard for me right now and I'm trying something new, or yeah, just share that like this is hard for me to do. Or, you know, when we make requests of people and we have the courage to do something new, it gives the people who we love permission to try that out with us too, and for them to live a different, a more free, more courageous kind of life. So I think it's exciting when we're willing to change some of these patterns and do a different dance with people.
Mm-hmm. And it really does increase the intimacy, showing people what we're doing, what we're thinking, how we're feeling, what we want, and expressing that. It's a real way of showing ourselves, and we're going to feel more understood, and we're going to feel heard because we're actually expressing ourselves. Erica, there was something else I wanted to say about what you were sharing. The confusion. Bear with me a sec while I summon it.
You just did it right there, Steph.
Mm-hmm. It's the discomfort piece. Trying to set up future comfort for ourselves, right? Making requests. I think this is so natural as we discover what feels good to us and what doesn't. We start asking for things that we think are going to make us feel good, right? And that can get very confusing when feeling good sometimes is us, you know, trying to control life or other people, or just try to avoid discomfort generally. So I really love that you're able to stop in the moment, or, you know, after the moment, whatever it is, and notice these different parts of your mind in action and trying to sort them out. That's great work.
Thanks.
Anything else anybody wants to say about making requests or examples of how you make requests?
I have one more. And it's a different flavor of request. It's like asking for actual help. And again, I find the more that I'm true to myself in what I'm willing to give, the more I'm quite happy to offer help. Or, oh, sorry, the more I'm able to just straight up ask for some help from closer friends, and it brings other people closer to you because they can help, and it kind of creates this little thing. Like, I've got friends and I'm like, can you help me move a table? And before I would have been like, oh, hey, you know, I know it's a Tuesday and you've got work, blah, 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 blah. And I kind of, like Caterina was saying, just like cut it all out and just be like, hello, I really need some help. Are you available? They say yes or no. It feels kind of weird to just straight up ask for a thing, but I ask, they help. It's good. They feel like they helped me. And other times when people are refusing to ask, like people that I know won't ask for help, I sort of feel a little bit robbed of the opportunity to help them.
Mm.
We love you, just want to help you, but you don't want to give it to me, then so like that. I like that cycle where it's like giving and receiving. It's like be more firm in your own yes, and then you can offer it and then expect that, like, and it just feels nice.
Mm-hmm. Georgianna, I am always in awe of how you essentially make requests, how you bring feedback to men you're dating. Is there anything that you'd like to say about that?
Let me sit with that for a minute. That made me laugh.
In terms of making requests. So I think in this case, it's, you know, a pretty loaded situation. Let me set up a theoretical scenario here. You're dating a man, you feel invested, you love each other, and there's some level of commitment, but it's, you know, still newish. Let's say anytime in the first 2 years, I'm going to call newish. And there's something that this man is doing that drives you bonkers, and you have to address it. How?
You mean you're giving me a real life scenario that I've lived?
At least once.
I think, I mean, I'm just going to say what comes to mind. It might not be in any particular order, but things that are important for me in that kind of situation is to slow down, breathe, feel my feet. Often reminding myself that it's not an emergency, right? It's not life or death. It doesn't need to be spoken of right in this moment while I'm in this heated, intense emotional experience if it's stirring that up for me. So time, allowing myself to take time, slow down, getting clear on like what my needs are and what about that situation wasn't meeting my needs. Getting clear on like, what is this stirring up for me that is my stuff and has nothing to do with this man? And then coming to like, do I have a request of this man, or do I just want to share what my experience of that was like, if he's open to hearing? And I think it was Pari who said it, like permission giving, you know, like I want to share my experience of that situation with you. Are you open to hearing? Or are you open to hearing it right now? You know, and letting that person decide, I think helps those truths, my truths, land a bit better, is giving the person permission to choose. And then really speaking from the heart, of how something impacted me. And I've really practiced that of like, how did that impact me? What was that like for me? And so it takes away the blame on the other person. Like, you're wrong for this. But like, I experienced it in this way. And what I long for, what I desire is this. And, you know, is this something you would consider doing or not doing? Or sometimes it might be just a my thing, my issue that I'm needing to work through of, I know that maybe I'm overreacting to this thing and it's something I'm working through. So can you just have some patience with me while I learn how to be with this thing that's new for me? So I think those are some of the things that come to mind.
Beautiful.
Also, like the dance between speaking from my heart and also being really direct. Like, I didn't like that. You know, that's a really simple sentence, but it's hard for us to say that sometimes, right? But to be able to add the vulnerability of like, there's a part of me, oh, this is something, I guess I like to speak in parts, you know, there's a part of me that really loves this or enjoyed that. And then there was a part of me that found that really challenging. And to be able to honor that feeling, honor like, this is what didn't work for me. This is what did work for me. I think sometimes people find it easier. I find it easier to receive feedback when I can feel that someone sees my genuine good intention, right? So I think sometimes being able to make clear to someone that I see that part too, when I'm also trying to bring up a part of this isn't working for me. And it's not so much like some people talk about the sandwich technique, you know, like say something good, then say what you don't like, then finish it. Like that feels so mechanical to me. But I think as human beings, those polarities exist within us anyways about a situation. You know, part of me likes this, part of me didn't like that so much. I think I would like more of this. I think I'd like less of that. So just honoring the humanness of that experience. And then also knowing that there's things that I will do that drive someone else crazy. I think that helps. That like, you know, knowing what are deal breakers and what are not, knowing when it's knowing when it's needed to say, this doesn't work for me, and when it's just my own work to be with and bring some curiosity and compassion to them and to me about like, what is this stirring up for me? So, and learning to discern the difference between that. But all of that takes time. I think it takes time that we learn to be with ourselves and discover ourselves. And as we discover more of ourselves and our likes and dislikes, that becomes easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and expressing the feelings, you know, as you say, just expressing what you're feeling can be enough, can be freeing, can cause the other person to take some action, or even just to know you better and understand the situation better.
Mhm. Yeah, I find speaking from the heart while not making it the other person's responsibility to like do everything to care for my heart has made giving feedback in a relationship easier.
Mhm. Beautiful. What a great conversation. Is there anything else anybody wants to say on any of these subjects?
Yeah, this was a really good conversation. It comes full circle, I think. The saying yes, saying no, and then to all the kind of requesting. It makes sense, right? And it is cyclical. Like the more that we learn to ask for what we need, the more yes and no counts, and we understand the value of it, and we don't just kind of give it away loosey goosey. We're very conscious about how we want to give it away.
Yeah. Well, and what we're feeling, right? So this is why I did the feelings check-in here at the beginning. The people who are listening to this may have just received a feelings wheel for the first time, and they might be totally new to learning what they're feeling in their body, and being able to connect with that in the moments where you need to either receive something or say yes or no to something, make some kind of decision, make a request. You got to be able to check in with those feelings, right? Which also takes time to learn.
Especially when you're a beginner. I feel like, oh, so much to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a feeling. Oh, I'm not in tune with those at all. It can be quite a long journey.
Right? Yeah, I thought I didn't really have any feelings, or I could just like manage all of them or control them or something.
Bottle them in.
Yeah.
Totally works. It's worked so far, right?
Right. Yeah. Everything's been fine with my approach to feelings in the past. No problems.
I remember when I used to describe my feelings, they would always not be feelings. They were just mind stories. And then I remember Steph or Georgianna, you would, kind of remind me of that every time. And it took a few months for me to realize, like, I'm not actually describing any body sensation yet. I'm just going straight to my mind. And so it took some time for that wheel to turn. Yeah, and even now, sometimes when people are like, "Oh, how are you feeling?" I don't actually describe the feeling at all. I just go into something else. So yeah, it's good to clock that and to know. So what helps me is actually just trying to start with describing the sensation in my body first.
Beautiful. Yeah, we have a habit of saying that we feel like blah, blah, blah. And as soon as we've said like, we've shot back up into our heads and we're talking about things we think instead of things we feel. It totally takes work to sink into the body for sure.
Those are good signs, like and that. I feel like. I think a parting thought I have is to remind everybody that these are just skills to be learned, skills to be practiced. And like anybody has capacity to build skills. You've already built tons of skills in your life, and these are just some more different skills. So even if you feel that it's not possible, I think this conversation is living proof that it is possible. You know, it's been such an honor and a joy to watch you women grow these skills, and while I grow them alongside you. And so for anyone listening, I think my reminder for you is that you can do this, and it might not always feel comfortable, and that's okay. You're growing your muscle to be with discomfort, and that's worth a whole lot.
Hear, hear.